So we want to close out today. We're in the middle of a sermon series, and I know it probably strikes you as odd, but as we're singing Holy, 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 and you have these little people down there jumping up and down, little stick people down there, the reason we have that is because that's the imagery we're using for the sermon series, and it's supposed to be very down to earth, not high and lofty, but down to earth, and that's why we chose little stick people, because it's about as simple as you can get. And we're trying to press into that simplicity as a church and understand some big questions about who we are, what we're doing, and how we're going to get there. And so what we've been trying to do over the past 3 or 4 weeks is to give some paradigms, some ways of thinking about what we're doing here as a church and how we're going to get to wherever we're going. And so that's kind of been the heartbeat of what we've been talking about. And this sermon series is called Place. And so we're gonna start there. We've gone through pliability, leverage, abundance, and today we're talking about the idea of catalyst. And so I want to start with a little movie scene. There's a picture I'm going to have up here on the screen. It's just a picture of one of my favorite movies of all time. It's in my top 3 comedies, top 5 movies of all time. What About Bob? With Bill Murray. And if you've never seen it, you're dead to me. No, if you've never seen it, you should. If you need a laugh, this is a great movie to get you there. But there's one particular scene that I want to focus on, and that is Bob is kind of a disturbed individual who kind of links up to a psychiatrist who doesn't want him to be linked to him, and kind of turns his life upside down because he keeps following this man around. And as it unfolds, it's very funny. But this psychiatrist his name is Dr. Leo Marvin. He's very into himself. He thinks he's brilliant type thing. He's kind of self-absorbed a bit, and he's just written a new book, and so he's kind of in that space of being all that. And so Bob kind of is his humbling presence. And there's a particular scene where he wants his son to dive. Dr. Leo Marvin, he should be able to, he wants this big moment where his son dives. He wants to be a part of it, and so he keeps on him to try to get him to dive, and he gives him diving lessons, but the kid will never dive in. And so one day, Bob is out there, hanging out with them at family vacation, which he drove to be part of their family vacation. That's kind of part of the problem, obviously. And he's out there with his life jacket on, and he's asking this little boy about diving. What is the big deal about this diving thing? So the boy's explaining to him everything his father taught him, gets on the edge of the dock, and in this moment that you're kind of waiting, it's going to happen, the boy actually dives in with Bob's presence there, which the dad sees and freaks out, and is like, ah! And so he runs down, pushes Bob in the water, and it's this big scene. But this moment of plunging in is really critical. Because if you've ever experienced this as a child, do you remember that first time you dove from a higher platform? This sense of fear? Or maybe you were a child who had no fear, and so you're just like, but I remember these moments, because where I lived, there was this lake that had this high dive. And I remember you would walk out, and you just kind of, as a little kid, you just have this great, whoa, that's a lot higher up than I thought, and is this really a good idea? And so there's this wrestle that you have in your heart and soul, and there's so many different ways to describe this. One of them is through poetry. I'm not disappearing, I might quote from all these today, you never know. One of them is from poetry. There's a poet that I like that he talks about this diving moment, and it's called Anatomy of a Perfect Dive. And he's talking about this moment where it's time to change things, and so he says it's like a diving kind of experience where your feet are on the brink, and you're kind of bending, and you're feeling your balance, and all these moments are going together so that you can, at one point, with no fear, you can break through the fear and jump in. And this whole moment, I'm not going to read it, but he describes it as a surrender. He says, reach up with your arms as if this was less dive, more surrender. And I love that picture because you literally are surrendering to this moment, surrendering to the water. Less surrender, more ascension. Stretch until your heels lift from the sandstone. Or depending on the kind of dive, point your arms straight forward like a sleepwalker, a ghost without a sheet. Think of it as a blind man's bluff with an eye. And then your risk-taker gene tussles with your terra firma gene. Ignore them. He's describing this inner battle that you have in this moment. And this is what Catalyst is about. Catalyst is about connecting to some kind of energy or source that gives us the ability to step on the edge and say, God, this is kind of a surrender / a shaky kind of like, but I want to dive in and I want to make a difference in those lives that are around me, my neighborhood, my city. I want to be a part of the ripple effect of what you're going to do. And this is what Catalyst is about. Now, the next little picture I want you to see is as I was thinking about this idea of catalyst, I kind of got into a little bit of a deep dive in kind of more scientific, descriptions of catalyst. And so, you guys ever watch the Khan Academy? If you're a parent or a teacher, you probably watched the Khan Academy. And so this is their explanation. And as I was watching it, I was just like, I don't get it. So I'm more artsy, and I like theology, but when you get to a certain level of science and chemistry, and this is supposed to be like hydrogen peroxide with a certain catalyst coming in, and it lost me in about 30 seconds, And so that's not what we're going to be talking about today. There's others of you who know what maybe some of that means. I don't. We're talking about the catalyst. That is how the Webster's Dictionary would define it as an agent that provokes or speeds up significant change or action. There's an agent that makes the change happen. It activates change. And this is what I mean when I'm talking about catalysts. These are the kind of people we want to be, and this is the kind of church we want to become. And so my question is, with you, what does that look like? What does that feel like? And just so you know, this is a little, opening of maybe the mystery. Like, this is literally what I've been attempting to do for the last year and a half, is just like be a little catalyst of movement in all these spaces. Because that's what I want you to be. I want all of us to be little catalysts of God's grace and love wherever we are. Not just on Sunday, like little catalysts of movement and action and rippling effect wherever we find ourselves. And so I want to suggest that there's 3 spaces that I've been pushing on. If you don't know it, you're going to know it now. Or if you're new, then at least you get an overview of what's been going on here the last year and a half. So here's the 3 movements we've been pressing for this catalyst, this ripple effect that can take place. And that's, first of all, the ripple of the heart, then the ripples in the city, and then this reality that we live in a broken world and everything is not perfect, which we know this one well. But these are 3 catalyst ideas that I've been trying to push in everything I've talked about, in every sermon series, and everything we do. Let's begin with ripples of the heart, because we've talked a lot about this, and I want you to see it. So I don't know if you've thought about this, but a heart is basically just a triangle that's kind of like expanded on certain sides, right? It's like an upside down triangle. And I love triangles. Triangles are my favorite shape. It's weird if you don't have a favorite shape. Do you have a favorite shape? I mean, not. Okay. You should get a favorite shape. Mine is a triangle, and there's many reasons. If you want to talk for hours about it, just let me know. But I want you to think of your heart in a kind of a triangular, kind of like the interior life of who you are. Not just your emotions. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the inner you. And it's very complex in there, as we know. But I'm going to try to put it in like a framework that you can understand, which is on the screen right now. And that is, if you think of in the interior self as you have your mind. Think of this as like a big castle. We've talked about this in Heartland. We had this discussion a while ago. Think of your mind as like this castle that's being built. This castle of reality and truth and wisdom. And then think about the desires on the bottom there. Can you not see that? It's kind of in white. Oh, okay. That's interesting. It didn't transfer over like I had it on my screen. So that says mind, and then the bottom one says desires. And think of desires as like a big garden inside of you that is like growing and has all kinds of roots and fruit and all kinds of stuff. It's like lush, and some of it's kind of broken down and trampled on, and it's just this messy, organic kind of thing going on. This is part of who you are, your desires, or the old writers used to call it your affections. This is what you yearn for and your longings. And then on the other side, there it is. Oh, thank you. Whatever you did, that's great. Character. Think of these as like the pathways that connect all this, the roads that are being built from the mind to the desires, and then in the middle, this is the CC is the control center. This is that part of you that makes decisions and chooses things. This is that part of you that's free to react in certain ways. And then the emotions, which we usually focus on when we think about the heart, is kind of like what's bursting out of all this. The emotions is kind of like the reactions to all that's happening internally in the inner you and your mind and your desires. And as this character is formed in you, the patterns that you live in day after day after day become the character and the pathways that you travel all the time. And this is kind of how the internal self works. And I'm making it very simple, obviously. It's much more complex. But I think it's a lot more, I think we think about it way too simply. There is so much happening on the interior part of who we are, and we typically only focus on the outside. And so we've been trying to understand the importance of focusing on the inner self. And then the next slide kind of shows what I want you to see, that there's four big agents that promote a kind of ripple effect of change and transformation in the interior parts of you. So if you want to change, if you want to develop, if you want to grow, and you want that inner self and you to become stronger and braver and more courageous and more humble and more wise, and you want that to happen in you, which I hope the very fact that you're here says you want that. If you want that to happen, there's at least 4 big agents that provoke this in us. And we've talked about them here over and over again in different ways, because we always keep coming back to it. And we will. And here they are. It's very simple. The first one is listening to God. We take a posture of, God, do you want to say something to us? And I'm not saying this Bible is God, but I'm saying He speaks through His Word. And so we take a listening posture. Followers of Jesus are listeners. It's like we're walking around like this. What do you think about that, God? Like we have a listening heart posture before God. This is part of what it means to be a Christian. We are listeners. And we're listening to someone specific. We're listening to God. That's crazy. The second one is honesty with God. Like we don't have to hide. We know that God sees and we're okay with that. And this is why we sing songs and we talk about our brokenness and our messiness. We're honest with God about some days I don't even feel like I believe in God. Have you experienced that? Some days I'm angry at God. Some days I'm just confused. Some days I feel nothing. Anybody experience this? Yes, this is the reality. And we bring that into our relationship with God. With God. He's not offended by it or discouraged by it. His loving presence is there unconditionally with us. And so we're honest with Him. And then the third one, we're loving like God. These are all these agents that begin this ripple effect of catalyzation in our hearts. Loving like God. We begin to see people around us and move toward them like God moves toward us time and time again. It baffles my mind that you can sit in church week after week after week and not move toward people with humble, gracious love. I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying if you don't, it baffles my mind. We are literally sitting in a space that is here to celebrate the overwhelming, unconditional love of God. If nothing else, this just makes us empathetic, kind, generous, gracious people with every person on the planet. If nothing else. And then participation in God. Like we get to participate in God. This is mind-boggling. We've been invited to participate in the love that has been within the Godhead from all eternity. This is what the cross, the work of Jesus, opens up for us. It opens up a huge door of, come, join the love and joy and delight of the Godhead. Join us. We're like, okay. Now, all four of these things, if you've been paying attention for the last almost 2 years, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. These four things are the essential rhythms of the early church. This is what they did. They devoted themselves, Acts 2:42. I'm not going to open, I brought my little Bible so I wouldn't go as long today, but I don't even need to read it because I've said it so many times to you. You know it. The believers who just came to Christ, they just saw the beauty and the glory of what Jesus had done on the cross. 3,000 of them. They're celebrating. They've got little t-shirts on that say, I love Jesus, He's King, and they're like hugging each other, and, the Spirit's moving, and it's they're singing songs with whatever they sang with. I don't think they did guitars. Whatever they did, they were doing their thing, and they're all like, now what? And the text tells us the now what. They began to devote themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the breaking of the bread, to the fellowship, and the prayers. This is what they did. They began to listen to God, to be honest with God, to love like God, and to participate in God. And this is what we do here. Why? Because this is how that ripple transforms our hearts. This is the catalyst. These moments of participation with God and honesty before God and this love of God, it changes us. I dare you to try to not be changed by the love of God. It's good luck. I'm telling you, it is that powerful. And you say, well, what's the power there? Well, it's two things. It's two particular things in the Scriptures. It's the gospel, which remember the Apostle Paul, he said, it's one of the most famous verses in the Bible, I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. Why? He says, and I quote, because it is the power of God for salvation to those who believe. So Paul is saying, if you want to see the saving love and grace of God, it begins with some power, some force. Something has to put the finger in the water of that ripple so it can start rippling. And that force that begins that ripple, that catalyst power, is the gospel. It is the announcement that Jesus Christ has gone to the cross. He has done everything necessary to draw the world in the love of God. It's this announcement that it has happened. It has historically happened, and it has flipped the world upside down and changed everything. And so this gospel is the power. And the second thing I would say on a more practical level is grace. You guys use that word a lot, don't you? And we sing one of the most famous songs, Amazing Grace. That word in Scriptures is more than just about how people get saved in language, churchy language. That word is about the loving energy of God flowing to us and through us, especially in our trials. This is what happened with Paul in 2 Corinthians 12:9, where he is suffering. We don't know what he's suffering from. He had some thorn in the flesh, it says in the Scriptures. Some people think he might have been going blind. Some people think he might have had epilepsy. We don't know, because there's different indications we see in his letters. But whatever it is, the text says that he asked God 3 times to take it away. This is the Apostle Paul. He's kind of high on the charts of somebody who knows and loves God. Would you agree? He wrote half the New Testament. So the Apostle Paul prays, God, take this away from me, please. And each time God says, no, my grace is sufficient for you because my strength is made perfect in your weakness. My grace is sufficient. What is he talking about? He's talking about this power, this energy, this loving energy of God flowing to us and through us. It's not just some mystical, fanciful thing. It's real energy from God to help us to make it through suffering and trials. That's good news because we're going through a lot of them, right? So this grace is that power that changes right in the middle of our suffering. And this is how I think it works. This next picture. is kind of how I think it works. These 4 kind of practices, they are the ripple effect, this participation with God and loving like God and listening to God. This honesty with God, it ripples out in our hearts in faith and hope and love, and it changes us. Now, you say, well, that's great, and that's in us, but what about the city? Well, there's ripples in the city too. I'm just going to fly through these, okay? Because this whole sermon series is about this. So I'm just basically recapping real quickly. These ripples in the city take place when we are pliable, which we've already done a whole sermon on this. We don't take ourselves too seriously, and we adjust for the good of others with humility. We bend with what's going on because we care about other people, and we want to see God do beautiful, changing things in our community, in our neighborhoods, in our city. So we're pliable people, like that palm tree we talked about. And that begins a ripple in a city. The other one is leverage. We take the problems of our neighbors seriously, and we move with wisdom and love accordingly. We assess what's going on and how can we use our resources and our giftings and what God has given us and our burdens, and how can we leverage all that with some beautiful idea to help lift the weight of that pain or trial or burden or challenge. And that starts a ripple in our city. And then abundance. We recognize the extravagance and the inclusiveness of the love of God and allow its bounty to spill over in every part of our life like little ripples of little catalyzing ripples in our city. Do you understand that when you're just walking around the city or your little area, this is happening, whether you know it or not. If you are living in this transformative grace of God, you become a little catalytic agent that's just spilling over at your work, at your school, in your neighborhood. The next one is catalyst, what we're talking about today. We allow the work of God in us together to make us the kind of people that give ourselves away wherever we are. This is what we're talking about, this giving of ourselves away. And just as in the heart, as these 4 things kind of press into our hearts and expand in faith and hope and love, when we begin to act like this and live like this in the city, that faith, hope, and love spreads in our city as well. Now, real quickly, that catalyst, go to the next slide, and I'm going to fly through these. So here, you say, well, what does that look like, just impractically? Well, here you go. What if you're a catalyzing, agent of the love of God in our city? What would that look like? Number 1, you'd smile. Just guessing. If the love of God is like you're swimming in it, I'm not saying things are going to be good and everything's going to be perfect, but you will have a kind of a joy about you that is unique. You'll listen to people. You'll remember what people are going through in their stories. You'll be a person who is ready to help. You'll be a person who is quick to forgive, not easily offended. You'll be a person who is including other people as much as you possibly can. You'll be a person who supports other people. You'll be a person who tells the truth, even when it's challenging, but you'll do it in a gracious, gentle way. You'll be a person who talks out the truths and the wisdom and the reality that you've learned in humble and appropriate ways. You'll be a person who gives space for people to hurt and to adjust and to be who they are without putting guilt and pressure on them. This is kind of just practically what you'll feel like as you move about the city or your neighborhood or your town. In the church, this is what it'll feel like. If you're these kind of people, this is what it feels like to have a bunch of people like this as little ripples in this church. You'll have people who are like happy about sharing life together, who are strategizing together, who are caring for one another, who are serving one another, who are being creative together, who are participating together, who are helping each other develop and become better humans. APEST, remember that whole thing? You'll be these kind of people who are pressing into the gifts that God has given you, the apostolic, prophetic, evangelistic, shepherding, or teaching gift. You'll be pushing into that. You'll be praying together, learning together, singing together. That's what it'll feel like to be here if we're all a bunch of these little catalyst kind of people. And then in the city, we will be people that connect as a church, and we'll have our presence here, but we'll collaborate with other people and partner with other organizations. We'll serve, we'll find our leverage, how we can leverage our opportunities and our resources for the good of the city. We'll seek justice, we'll love mercy. This is what we'll be like as a unit in this city. And this is all catalyst, and this is how I'm going to close. The last question is simply this, but what about when it all falls apart? Like my life, which could happen tomorrow. What about when everything comes crashing down? I'm just going to close with this. I won't skip past the next slide. I'll talk about that later, and just go to the last slide with the mountains there, if you would, Ruth. There's a book that I would highly recommend by David Brooks, New York Times kind of best-selling author, The Second Mountain. He describes this journey of life like two mountains. And he says the first mountain is kind of like the mountain where you're trying to get to the top to achieve everything you want. What do you want to be when you grow up? Remember that question they used to ask when you were a kid? What do you want to be when you grow up? It's like, what are you aiming for? What's the big goal? When you get to the top, you're like, I did it. What dream do you have deep inside of you? What's your, how do you want to, use your life to be successful or whatever it is? It's kind of the American dream kind of idea. It tends to be more self-centered about me, what I want to do, very individualistic. I can do this. I'm going to make this happen. And it's promoted and celebrated as kind of a primary thing in our culture. The problem, David Brooks says, is that at some point, we either get to that point or we never get to it and we fall off. We fall off the mountain. Something happens. Oftentimes it's something relational. A marriage falls apart. Our body falls apart. It's physical. Someone passes that's close to us. Financial ruin of some kind. You name it. We've all experienced different measures of this. But he says, here's the deal. He says, this can happen, he said, between the time it can happen at 8 or it can happen at 88. There's no time frame it happens. It happens to different people at different times. And what happens is they fall and they roll down into the valley of despair. And he uses this phrase that I love. He says, but people who are made larger by suffering, they take what happens in this dark valley space and they begin to transform their way of seeing the whole world. And instead of it being a me-centered space, now they're looking at how can I give my life for others? And that's the big switch. The ego gets flipped on its head. Instead of it being a me-centered reality, now we're like, how can I love and serve and help and be a part of something? That's why I put a little person with the, dude on their back with a little heart, because all of a sudden now they're together moving towards something and there's this shared vision of what life is about. Last quote, I promise, from one of the greatest pieces of literature ever written called The Divine Comedy. This is, you may never have read it, it's fine, but I'm going to read you the last line so then that's all you need. The last line of this 3-part journey from hell to heaven with this metaphor of, one of the most famous pieces of literature ever written. This is how Dante concludes the Divine Comedy. He says this, as in a wheel whose motion nothing jars, by the love that moves the sun and other stars. Now, that love that he's talking, the end of this is a huge journey of somebody through all kinds of craziness and madness. And at the very end, the last line is the love that moves the sun and other stars. When it comes down to it, the end of the whole story is we are literally living in a universe that is chock full of the love of God. It moves the sun and other stars. It is that powerful and robust and present. And so as we begin to understand that, the idea of our life flips upside down, and we begin to see this is not about me. This is not about my deal or my success or my fame or what I'm doing. This is about how can I give my life for others. And when you make that switch in your heart, it's like getting to the edge of the diving board and diving in, and you get to watch the ripple effect of God's grace moving out and impacting people all around you. And here's what I'm trying to do as a pastor. I'm trying to do that here. That's what I do. You say, what do you do? Every day, that's what I do. I dive in and see what happens. Because I don't have all the answers. You've probably figured that out by now. I make a lot of mistakes. The worship team knows it. We mess up, but here's the deal. We keep diving in. And have we suffered greatly? Yeah. Have all of you suffered and had trials and brokenness all over? Yes, absolutely. But we keep diving in because we trust that we are surrounded by the love that moves the sun and other stars. And so we dive in together and we see what God will do as a ripple effect into our church, into our community, into our city, for His glory and for the good of all. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes with me?